like Red Hulk, you notice we kind of stopped, and the reason why is because I literally came back this week and we're just doing catch up. So it was Planet Hulk, World War Hulk, and what this video will do is it'll effectively wrap back around into why it is that Red Hulk emerged. It'll launch into that new era of the Incredible Hulk under the writing of Jeff Lowe, because again, this is kind of the continuation of Greg Pak's run on the character. I guess the conclusion of Greg Pak's run on the character. And so you'll find the playlist for the Incredible Hulk down in the description for all the Hulk content that I have so far. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and throw World War Hulk and Planet Hulk in chronological order of the Hulk series. That way you guys can literally just kind of follow along with the Incredible Hulk, going from Greg Pak's initial run with Planet Hulk up until, you know, the conclusion of this event. Although it did kind of predate Planet Hulk a little bit, but you guys understand what I'm saying in terms of the most notable stories of World War Hulk under the writing of Greg Pak up into the modern day. But in the last video, we had talked about how Doctor Strange had made a pact with the extra-dimensional demon named Zom, who of course was extremely powerful and it required the Living Tribunal to take him out. And so Doctor Strange has quite a bit of power here, and this is proven in the fact that he goes toe-to-toe with the Incredible Hulk. I mean, well, I wouldn't say toe-to-toe. He's able to hold his own for a little while against the Incredible Hulk. The issue with this is that we're talking about Doctor Strange channeling a level of power that's so extreme that he can't keep it going for the long haul. Now, with regards to the Hulk himself, what's funny about this is that Doctor Strange almost feels himself being corrupted by Zom's power, and that's really the way it works. I mean, we're talking about beings in the Marvel universe from extra dimensions. When a person takes on the power of one of those beings, that power will corrupt them. That power will alter their perception. It will take away from what it is that makes them who they are and turn them into something much, much darker. And that's what happens with Doctor Strange. The power is so extreme, the hate, the anger, the rage of Zom is so extreme that it actually permeates throughout his entire being. Now, this all really comes to a head when Doctor Strange loses sight of protecting those civilians that are watching the fight unfold as he's fighting the Incredible Hulk. And when he throws him into a building, the building comes crashing down around him, and the Incredible Hulk is actually able to save some of these people. Now, he's able to break them out of the rubble, and Doctor Strange immediately becomes remorseful. But this goes towards the Incredible Hulk's larger plan of depicting Doctor Strange along with the rest of the Illuminati as villains at heart as opposed to actual superheroes. And this goes to his credence. I mean, when it came down to it, Doctor Strange lost sight of the bigger picture. I mean, he basically became a bad guy, and in doing so, he almost cost the lives of innocent people in his blind rage. And so the Incredible Hulk turns it on Doctor Strange immediately and just overpowers him in the extreme. I mean, he just starts tearing him apart piece by piece. Now again, Rick Jones tries to neutralize the situation. Now again, you know, with Rick Jones as a character, he kind of has a lot of leeway here. He's really one of the few characters in Marvel Comics that can really talk to the Incredible Hulk the way that he wants to, because the Incredible Hulk doesn't see him as an enemy. The Incredible Hulk sees him as a friend. Now, in truth, right now, the Incredible Hulk sees Rick Jones as a guy who's just kind of getting in the way, but Rick Jones poses such an insignificant threat to the desires of the Incredible Hulk that he really doesn't pay much attention to him. Instead, he just kind of considers him as an annoyance, a dude that just goes in periodically and kind of gets in the way. And so initially, where Incredible Hulk had the ability to kill Rick Jones, he doesn't. Instead, what he does is he takes those captured superheroes to the gladiatorial arena that he's created in Madison Square Garden and basically says, you're all going to start fighting each other. Now, this is not arbitrary. In fact, the Incredible Hulk's making a point. And what he does before each of these guys, you know, begins to get into the fray, and before he subjects each of them to the experiences that he had, he actually allows regular people to stand up and voice their concerns. Now, this is a perfect example, with Greg Pak talking about this is a perfect example of people who don't know what they're asking for. And what I mean is that under normal circumstances, or I guess in virtually any situation, when things are bad enough, people will believe what they want to believe. And in this situation, things have become extremely dire in the Marvel universe. And I don't mean just the Incredible Hulk waging war, I mean everything up to this point. Civil War, the idea of the Superhuman Registration Act, the 50-state initiative, things before that, you know, Operation Galactic Storm, the Kree Skrull War, you know, maximum security, all these events had just continually led to the fact that humanity was becoming fed up with superheroes as they existed now. But in their blindness, in their anger, and in their refusal or their inability to know all the facts, they make the best decisions they can, but they make boneheaded decisions. And what they do is they say, well, we want the Incredible Hulk's law. Now, in truth, the law the Incredible Hulk is posing here is solving problems through gladiatorial combat. I can almost guarantee you none of these people would survive a gladiatorial thing, but they look to the short term, they don't look to the long term. They don't look to the question of, well, what happens 5 years from now? What happens 10, 15 years from now? Instead, they're looking at what happens tomorrow. Now, in truth, this is Greg Pak just showing how dire the situation is. These people are so desperate for something other than what they've had that they'll take virtually anything if it's not what they have had. And so what we have are individuals speaking up. We have the nephew of Bill Foster, who was killed when Reed Richards and Tony Stark cloned Thor, and that Ragnarok character began tearing through all the superheroes and killed Bill Foster. It's basically victims of people who have lost loved ones because of the actions of the Earth's superheroes. But again, it's just one of these instances where they look at all the Earth's superheroes and they see a problem, instead of saying, are there some some superheroes out there who were genuinely doing good things. And so again, from here, we basically switch to the Incredible Hulk putting each of these guys through the ringer, in the sense that he says when he first arrived, he had to fight these various monsters and these organisms and so on that were on the planet, and he makes them go against, you know, one of these giant monsters. Of course, that monster is essentially defeated, but then he says the next thing I had to do is I had to fight my own kind, or I had to fight people like me in the gladiatorial games using obedience discs. And of course, these guys have already been planted with the obedience discs. You know, Reed Richards, Black Bolt, Tony Stark, Doctor Strange, they've already had obedience discs thrown on them, and so they essentially have to do what they're told, or else it'll fry their brain in the process. And so he says, you guys now have to go against each other and fight each one of each other. And they don't want to. Well, I mean, they have to, but they don't really want to. They're doing it because they're forced to, not because they actually want to. Now, this again is where Greg Pak basically says that people will always become their own worst enemies. And the reason why is because while this event's unfolding, while this conflict is taking place, the people who are watching it begin to switch away from, yeah, these heroes, they need to understand that it's not okay to do whatever they want to basically just start demanding blood. They're like, kill, 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 kill. And this shows that people will become swept up in this situation. And it shows the fact that people don't usually think rationally in times of desperation. They think irrationally. And so what we have is Tony Stark effectively using whatever tools are available to him in order to hack into the technology of the Death's Head Guard, because again, they're basically just machines. And so as he hacks into the Death's Head Guard, he is able to turn them momentarily against some of the forces of the Incredible Hulk. The issue with this is that with Elway using the staff to control the obedience discs, she says, well, fine, if you want to use the machines, then we can use the machines. And she forces Tony Stark to use the machines to basically attack all of them. And so again, it's really showing the Illuminati that they don't have a way out here. I mean, there's not a way for them to just kind of end and walk away from this whole thing. Instead, there's consequences. They're going to have to fight to the death. And so finally, you know, after all this is said and done, with all this being broadcast on TV, with Tony Stark on the verge of being killed and the decision being made by the Incredible Hulk based on whether he gives a thumbs up or a thumbs down, Robert Reynolds has had enough. Robert Reynolds is tired of watching all this unfold. He's tired of seeing the Incredible Hulk become so violent. He's tired of seeing some of the Earth's greatest heroes forced to fight against one another. He's tired of standing by and watching all this unfold. Not only that, he also knows he's the only person that can go against the Incredible Hulk, and that's what he does. He says, okay, you know what, let's end this. Let's bring this conflict to an end. Let's finally have this stop. And so he takes off for Madison Square Garden. Now, again, it takes him a few minutes to get there, but I mean, well, I would really say seconds for him to get there. But in the time that it takes to get there, we again have, you know, Reed Richards, who's more or less being forced to kill Tony Stark. But while this is happening, Tony Stark is successfully able to hack into the obedience discs and effectively force his obedience disc to be dissolved and allow him to move freely, or at the very least to get away from the conflict. And so in response to this, Reed Richards keeps trying to reiterate to the Incredible Hulk, we're not the reason why your people were killed. Now we'll actually find out that he's right, that the shuttle was not a bomb. It was not designed to explode after some predetermined amount of time. Instead, someone screwed with it. Somebody set it up to blow up. But before they can really get any further, you know, Reed Richards says, if you're not willing to listen, then I'm going to give you one final chance to surrender. And the Incredible Hulk says, or what? And the Sentry finally shows up. Now this is so cool because the Sentry at this point is just unbridled power. This is like the peak of his character. Whenever people talk about how powerful the Sentry is, whenever they say, here is how powerful the Sentry is when he's at his absolute max, this is the moment they're referring to in terms of its capabilities. I mean, the Incredible Hulk is on a whole nother level of strength, but the Sentry's right up there with him. I mean, these guys are even. These guys are dead even. But the cool thing about this is the Sentry almost never lets loose. This is not new to the Incredible Hulk. You know, freaking out, lashing out, destroying stuff. His level of strength is higher than it's ever been, but his mentality is much the same as it's always been before. He just wants to be left alone. Right now it's revenge. You know, he's taking it out on taking out the Illuminati, but for the most part, you know, his experience in lashing out and tearing stuff up and fighting and destroying things is not new. But for the Sentry, he always held back. He always never let his power get to the extreme because one, I mean, he's an agoraphobic. He's terrified of his own power. But two, because of the fact that if he did let loose, there was always a chance the void would come out. But in this instant, in this moment, he doesn't care. Instead, he's actually relishing, he's celebrating in the idea of just letting this unbridled strength rip through the Incredible Hulk and absolutely just pummel him left and right. Now, again, you know, the Hulk is able to withstand all this just because of the fact that his durability is so extreme. But for the Sentry himself, I mean, he's excited about being able to cut loose. And he even says that, you know, he says, does it always feel this good when you let loose? Does it always feel this nice when you just finally let it all go and let your rage completely take over? Because again, the Sentry has never really had this chance before. Something else I also want you to notice here, the way Greg Pak is depicting this situation, the Sentry's in total control. He's not losing control. There's no concern of the void coming out. The Sentry is in absolute total control of himself. Not only that, when the Incredible Hulk goes to punch him, this is again Greg Pak reminding us these guys are even. Like these guys are on an even playing field. Now, this battle could not just go on infinitely. I mean, if it were to continue on really any further than it is right now, the massive amount of energy that's being expended between their blows, the massive amount of energy that Sentry's letting off would annihilate the entirety of New York City. I mean, this is really like atomic bombs trading blows with one another. I mean, the sheer force of impact from the Incredible Hulk hitting Sentry or Sentry hitting the Incredible Hulk is more than enough to shatter a building, let alone lay waste to the entire city in and of itself. And so in response to this, you know, in the background, Reed Richards, Tony Stark, these guys are grabbing these satellites, grabbing all the weapons they can that really pose any measure of substantial damage capability. And they say, we've got to hone these in on these two guys. We've got to bombard them with enough energy that their bodies effectively shut down. Their bodies just can't handle it anymore, and they revert back to their normal human forms. Now, the intention is to launch this weapon, but before they do, we end up finding out that, you know, that Robert Reynolds and Bruce Banner actually just fight each other down to the point that they're physically exhausted. You know, now some of this is because of the fact that Robert Reynolds is just letting off so much energy that is continually calming the Hulk down to the point that he reverts, but at the same time, it's also just a massive expenditure of energy. I mean, this is how hard these guys were fighting. They were fighting to the point that in truth, they were just exhausted physically, mentally. They had nothing left to give. And this is so cool because this is basically, you know, Greg Pak saying, when it all comes down to it, these are the only guys. When it comes to physical strength, you know, when it comes to just sheer raw strength, these are the two most powerful beings on the face of the planet on Earth in Marvel Comics, Worldbreaker Hulk and the Sentry. They're the only two that could ever stand, or I guess Sentry's the only one that could ever stand up to Worldbreaker Hulk when everybody else failed. Colossus failed, Juggernaut failed. Sentry was the only one that could pull it off. And so the idea is that with Bruce Banner returning back to his normal form, everybody except for, you know, Hero and the Shamed, the Warbound are pretty shocked to see that Bruce Banner's just a guy. You know, the Incredible Hulk is just a regular person. Now, Hero and the Shamed uses this as an example to say, well, you know, within each of us is an unbridled force of power, you know, a force of nature, something like that. But Meek does not want to see this end. Meek does not want to see the world, you know, the world go peacefully. He wants to see all these heroes destroyed. And this is when we learn the truth. He goes to try to kill Bruce Banner in order to, you know, force the Hulk back out again. But when Bruce Banner dodges out of the way, or I guess when he's pushed out of the way by Rick Jones is impaled instead. And let me tell you something, Rob Core. Let me tell you something right now. And this is for really reals. All right. Bruce Banner's okay with you hitting him. All right, he's okay with you pummeling him because the Incredible Hulk will come out and it'll protect Bruce Banner. You know what he's not okay with? You know what he's not happy with? Harming the people he cares about. Woe betide the poor soul that harms someone that Bruce Banner cares about. And that's exactly what happens. Meek impales Rick Jones and Bruce Banner drops the hammer on him. He goes right back into the Incredible Hulk again and just starts ripping into Meek because in his mind, Meek's an enemy now. Meek harmed one of his friends. Not only that, Meek says, hey, I was your first friend. And Hulk says, no, Rick Jones was my first friend. Rick Jones was the first friend I ever had. And that's why I love Greg Pak's writing, because he says, hey guys, look, this all comes full circle. You know, yes, Bruce Banner is a force of nature when he's the Incredible Hulk. Yeah, it's an unstoppable force, just cutting a swath. I know you guys love it when I say that. He's cutting a swath throughout the superhero community. The X-Men couldn't stop him. The Avengers couldn't stop him. The Fantastic Four couldn't stop him. Doctor Strange, Iron Man, no one could stop him. He was unbridled, unleashed, unrelenting power, just beating against the superhero industry as it existed in the Marvel Comics universe. But when it came down to it, all it took was one of his Warbound impaling his friend for the Incredible Hulk to turncoat and begin ripping all of them apart. And that's what he does. He just basically starts tearing into all of them. Now, with Meek in the final moments of his life, I mean, you know, with these last few moments here and there, he says, I'm the one that did this to you. You know, he says, after you defeated the Red King, you formed a kingdom, you had a wife, you had a child coming. You know, we lived in the Crown City. It was peaceful times, but that's not who you are. You're a force of nature. You are a destructive force, just cutting through and tearing through everything that you come across. That's what you were made for. That's who you are. You cannot deny your nature. And he says, you forgot who you were. When you married Kyra, when you had a child, you know, when you fathered a child, when you formed a kingdom, when you ushered in an era of peace and united the clans on Sakaar, you forgot who you were. And I set off that bomb and I destroyed the city because I wanted you to remember who you were. The Incredible Hulk wrong answer. The Incredible Hulk, I mean, he doesn't, like, initially he doesn't even do anything. Like, he's literally just in the background watching these events unfold. And this, man, let me tell you something, people. Let me tell you something, Rob Core, fanboy. This is when the Incredible Hulk is at his absolute peak. It's momentary. All right, it's a moment in time. I mean, this is the equivalent of Thor, you know, absorbing the runes and becoming the multiversal rune king Thor. I mean, this is the Hulk beyond any level of strength he's ever been, even in this moment in time. All right, you know, Meek is killed by one of the Warbound, by the Brood, you know, that Brood species who, you know, is outraged at the fact that Meek would just sacrifice millions of people and their own kingdom for the purpose of, you know, jumpstarting the Hulk's rage. The Hulk himself, when they turn around and they say, hey man, like, are you okay? He's like, no, I'm not. And he just freaks. I mean, he smashes his hand, you know, he doesn't clap, almost shatters the entirety of the New York skyline. And I mean, this is just, I've never seen the Incredible Hulk so mad before. But the kicker about this is the Incredible Hulk's not mad at anybody else but himself, because in his mind, he brought all this on them. Not only that, in his rage, he stomps on the ground. Now, we're told that he shakes the eastern seaboard. I would disagree. I think he shakes the world. Like, I think with rage like this, like he almost breaks the world. And he says that. He says, you know, fire your weapons, do whatever you need to do, you know, calm me down before I destroy the world, because the Hulk's rage is just increasing. I mean, by the second, he's getting madder and madder and madder and madder. This is a true depiction of the infinite rage of the Incredible Hulk. I mean, there's no calming him down. You know, he just keeps getting madder and madder and angrier and stronger and stronger. And it'll get to the point where he will destroy the world by stomping on the ground if he continues to get as angry as he's getting. And so because of this, you know, Tony Stark says, okay, fine, you know, on this mark, fire your weapons. And so they end up firing off, you know, the weapons on all these different satellites. And in response, Bruce Banner is just bombarded with this massive amount of energy discharge, and it forces the Incredible Hulk back into his normal form. But you know, as Bruce Banner, this really just kind of rounds out the story, because as Banner, you know, he's effectively subdued. I mean, he's not dead, but he's effectively subdued. And what they do is they essentially tranquilize him to a degree. Of course, they take his Warbound into custody, and they end up taking him out to the middle of the Mojave Desert, taking him out to a facility, and then putting him 3 miles underground, so that if he ever were to lose it again, he'd be stuck underground, and people would have at least some measure of notification that he was going to lose his mind. But this right here wraps back around. All right, so this brings us to the introduction of Red Hulk in Jeff Loeb's Incredible Hulk run, his 1-year-long run in 2 volumes. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained and you guys enjoy this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you guys like this video, drop a like and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys thought about Worldbreaker Hulk, World War Hulk, because I got to tell you, man, it's one of my favorite stories. One of my favorite stories. I think it gets better though when we get to like Fall of Hulks and we get to World War Hulks, when like everyone becomes a Hulk. I mean everyone, like Spider-Man becomes a Hulk, like the whole 9 yards. But it's a really, really cool series of events that come out here in the next, you know, little while. I think we're gonna have a pretty exciting next few weeks in terms of releasing our Hulk videos. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel. So when it comes to comic books, you know, of course, writers have runs. And their runs last for usually however long they want them to, or sometimes it's only for a predetermined amount of time. With writers that are relatively new, their runs are usually predetermined by Marvel editorial. For more seasoned writers, they kind of have free reign on what it is they do and don't want to do. For example, you know, Bendis will say, I want to take over Iron Man, and he'll write Iron Man for however long he feels like it. He'll say, I want to take over the New Avengers, and he'll write the New Avengers for however long he feels like it. Whereas newer writers are just kind of given tasks, and it's really just the hierarchy of things, right? You know, it's like that in any job. You know, the new guys are assigned tasks, the veteran guys get to choose theirs. And with the Incredible Hulk, it's much the same way, in the sense that we had Peter David's run, which offered a lot of backstory on Banner's life and talked about how the Hulk persona was not just random. Bruce Banner had experienced a lot of, you know, torture and turmoil in his life. And so when he was exposed to the Gamma Bomb and the Incredible Hulk came into existence, the Incredible Hulk was a physical manifestation of all of his rage and anger about how unfair his life had been. With Greg Pak's run, Greg Pak came along along and he was like, okay, well, let's remove Hulk from the Earth landscape during Civil War, and we'll just throw him, we'll have the Planet Hulk event. And then it culminated with the Incredible Hulk coming back to Earth and waging war against humanity and the Illuminati, which ended with Banner being defeated, or I guess fighting to a standstill with the Sentry, and then Bruce Banner himself being thrown into a prison/lab, like a quarter mile underground or something like that. And so because of the way that World War Hulk ended, and because of the fact that Greg Pak was in the midst of focusing largely on Amadeus Cho and his own personal projects, it really fell to the shoulders of Jeff Loeb to relaunch it. But Jeff Loeb had been, he was a seasoned writer for Marvel Comics. He'd been writing for some time, and it was really his return to Marvel when he started out with the Hulk. And so he basically just kind of relaunched it, refreshed the whole thing by introducing the Red Hulk. Now, the way this initially picks up is we start out with Doc Samson. Now, Doc Samson's been a longtime member of the Hulk family. He's not new. You talk to anybody who's been reading The Incredible Hulk for any real measure of time, and they know exactly who Doc Samson is. His role has changed over the years, but he was a guy who, much like She-Hulk, was exposed to gamma radiation, but he had his own manifestation in the sense that his power would increase the longer his hair got, which is really kind of weird. But during this point in time when Doc Samson first showed up, it was really just experimentation. It was just trying new, wacky, and zany and crazy things. But because of the fact that Doc Samson was an intricate part of the Hulk mythos, he never really went away. He was always just sort of there, because when it came to the Incredible Hulk in terms of dedicated readers, it was much like Deadpool. There are a lot of people that know who Deadpool is, but they don't really read Deadpool stories. There's a lot of people who know who the Incredible Hulk is, but they don't read Incredible Hulk stories. Now, there's a lot more Incredible Hulk readers than there are Deadpool readers, but the fact remains here that the Incredible Hulk always just had this spot in the limelight of Marvel Comics with people knowing who he was. And so because of the fact that Marvel was bolstering his roster with Doc Samson, fans just kind of latched onto it. They were like, yeah, we like this concept of this guy. And so Doc Samson has sort of changed over the years, but one of his big draws was being a psychologist, being able to delve into the human mind, sometimes even being able to manipulate people, and because of his ability to understand the mind, had some measure of resistance to like telepathy and things like that. But what we do is we initially pick up in Dmitry, Russia. Now, the reason why this matters is because Doc Samson's quite literally just retracing the trails of a massive conflict with the Hulk. Now, the reason why, Doc Samson's here, the reason why She-Hulk's here, is because to the best of their knowledge, Bruce Banner is locked up in a cell underground. And so the question is, if some being showed up here and basically beat Abomination to death, then what happened? Like, who was this being? Who was this person that showed up? Because as far as Doc Samson's able to tell by going through and reliving, basically experiencing, all these, this entire battle, he's able to basically tap into the emotional state of this, Red Hulk as it was beating the hell out of Abomination. Now, this ultimately culminated in the Red Hulk not only, effectively punishing the Abomination, but also shooting him. Now, this is where things get a little bit different, because in their mind, Banner was just a force of nature. Banner was just sheer strength. He would just fight and pummel whoever it was that he was going against until he won. He was just brute force. Banner, unless we were talking about like Professor Banner, like Smart Banner, Savage Hulk, in and of his nature, didn't carry guns. He didn't shoot people. He would just beat the hell out of them. Not only that, this Hulk seems to have wherewithal. It seems to have a higher level of intelligence. And so what we do when we pan out is we realize it's not just Doc Samson and She-Hulk, it's also General Thunderbolt Ross, it's also Tony Stark, and it's also Maria Hill. Now, She-Hulk here is, of course, she's present here just because of the fact that she has so much experience with Banner, because, her becoming She-Hulk is part and parcel to Banner being Hulk. Of course, in the sense that she received a blood transfusion from Bruce Banner, which is why she became She-Hulk in the first place. Doc Samson's here because of his knowledge with psychology. Tony Stark is here because, remember, this is pretty soon after Civil War. Of course, it's before Siege and Dark Reign. And so, at this moment in time, he's still the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. This, of course, we have Maria Hill here just because it's Maria Hill. She's kind of the second in command for S.H.I.E.L.D. at the moment. And then we have Thunderbolt Ross because he's a guy that spent his life tracking down Bruce Banner. And so he's really one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to someone who has, who's exposed to gamma radiation. Now, at this point, Jeff Loeb gives us a little bit of bickering back and forth in the sense that, he establishes who the characters are. And that was the basis behind this. Because it was a relaunch, it was a picking up point. In addition to this, because it introduced a new Hulk, this relaunch was more of a starting point than other stories had been. And what I mean by this is whenever comic books relaunch characters, whenever it's like a soft rebranding or something like that, a lot of times things will stay the same. They'll simply say like, hey, this is, we're picking back up again with the Incredible Hulk. And so people who liked the Incredible Hulk will read it. People who didn't care about him wouldn't read it. But when Jeff Loeb came out and said, hey, there's a new Hulk on the scene, well, then everybody went to go read it because everybody wanted to know who this new Hulk was. Now, for those of you guys who weren't around, who weren't reading comics in 2008, I think it was January 2008 when this came out, when Red Hulk was announced, it was a big deal. Like, everybody wanted to know who the Red Hulk was. That was like the huge mystery. Who is the Red Hulk? And so ultimately, the group basically comes to the decision that this individual, this being, is essentially imbuing, just kind of letting off gamma radiation. Not only that, this being was able to completely overpower and take out Abomination with sheer force of will. Not only that, Abomination couldn't really offer much in terms of a counterattack. And so this tells us that whoever this person is extremely powerful in terms of their physical strength. Now, before they're able to get too much further, they're basically met with the Russian superhero team, the Winter Guard. Now, the Winter Guard is basically nonsense. They are dumb, but they have some cool history. For those of you guys who don't know, and we talked about this in my Colossus video, back when Colossus was a child, because of the Avengers, Russia was looking to create their own Avengers team. And so what they did is they literally just started rounding up people who had superpowers. The problem with this was that Colossus was basically rescued by Charles Xavier, and he ended up going on to join the X-Men. But the Winter Guard are effectively Russia's Avengers, is basically who they are. Red Guardian is a mantle like Captain America that's just passed down from one person to the next, so on and so forth. Crimson Dynamo, of course, has a pretty lengthy history, but the Winter Guard are about as irrelevant as it gets when it comes to superhero teams. They're right there alongside Alpha Flight. And so I know there's fans of Alpha Flight guys, but Alpha Flight's not really relevant. But the idea here is, the Winter Guard steps in and says, hey, look, Abomination was Emil Blonsky. Emil Blonsky was Russian. This fight took place on Russian soil. This is our crime scene. You need to leave. And essentially what happens, Doc Samson, Tony Stark, Maria Hill, they're like, hey, look, we're here investigating an act by what we believe to be someone who is the Incredible Hulk. Banner's managed to escape or is sneaking out or something along those lines, but we have every, just as much right to be here as anybody else. But ultimately they end up just kind of backing off. Tony Stark and them end up basically vacating. And the reason for this is because if they were to stay and they were to, engage in any real measure of a fight for the long term, because of course there's a scuffle between them, but if they were to turn it into something big, it would end up being an international incident. And right now, that's the last thing they need. And so as these guys are fighting one another, and as Tony Stark starts to level his head and starts to realize it's time for them to get out, they're suddenly met by a survivor of the village that's been totally obliterated in the fight between Abomination and Red Hulk. And this survivor simply just keeps saying red. And so what we do is we switch over to the Alaskan frontier, and we basically pick up with Rick Jones. Now again, Rick Jones has been a long time part of the Hulk mythos, and in fact, Bruce Banner becoming the Hulk was because of Rick Jones, in the sense that Rick Jones was a kid who was just goofing around, just kind of dicking off, and when the gamma bomb was set to go off, Bruce Banner ran out and pushed Rick Jones out of the way because he was sitting in the path of where the bomb was supposed to detonate, and in his place, Bruce Banner was imbued with this gamma radiation, becoming the Incredible Hulk. And ever since then, Rick Jones has kind of been this character that is like the one guy that can usually talk the Incredible Hulk down. Now, of course, you have Betty Ross, and Betty Ross was very much an important part of, the Hulk mythos. But in terms of anybody who wasn't Betty Ross, Rick Jones was the only other guy who could ever really call himself the Incredible Hulk's friend. But picking up in Alaska, we basically follow Rick Jones as he's going to be introduced as a character called A-Bomb. Now, we haven't really been given a fleshed out story at this point on how Rick Jones became A-Bomb, as far as I'm aware. As far as I'm aware, this is the first appearance that we get. Now, I haven't read too much into his character. I'm pretty sure there is a future story that fleshes that out. That may be something that we may or may not cover. But for the sake of this discussion, we end up traveling into the Death Valley, Nevada Air Force Base, where Bruce Banner's basically being held. Now, we're following, of course, Thunderbolt Ross and Doc Samson, because the question they have is, does Bruce Banner know what's going on? Does Bruce Banner have any inkling of what's happening here? Not only that, for the most part, it seems like it'd be impossible for Bruce Banner to escape from his confines. And so if there is someone running around that is a Hulk, then Bruce Banner is the one person to ask, because he's the one person in the world that has the most experience when it comes to gamma radiation. And so from here, we switch over to the new SHIELD helicarrier as it's been commissioned by Tony Stark after he became director of SHIELD. And at this point, it's really just kind of SHIELD doing some investigating as Maria Hill, saying, hey, we found the gun that was used to shoot Abomination to kill him. She also goes as far as to say that this weapon that was used seems to have been designed by SHIELD. And so whoever it was that's running around as a Hulk and that killed Abomination seems to be someone that is either familiar with SHIELD or works inside of SHIELD itself. But while She-Hulk and while Maria Hill and while Tony Stark are talking, suddenly the Red Hulk busts in. The Red Hulk smashes in and grabs She-Hulk. Now, at this point, it's really just panic. And the reason why is because while She-Hulk is able to hold her own, or at least it seems like she is, from what Tony Stark and Maria Hill are hearing, the Red Hulk was able to infiltrate a SHIELD shield helicarrier without them knowing. And so this presents a massive problem on a multitude of levels. First and foremost, how did he get in? Like, how did, if he was able to get in there, then obviously it's a regular person. Otherwise somebody would have said, hey, there's a giant red monster running around the ship. So it was obviously, Red Hulk in a human form. Not only that, he was able to, to get past all of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s defenses, which means that it's someone with clearance to get into S.H.I.E.L.D., which means it's probably a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent or a high-ranking official. But then while they're trying to figure this out, suddenly they're basically met with She-Hulk being thrown down below, meaning that she was easily toppled by Red Hulk. And so at this point, Tony Stark says, okay, fine. Maria Hill says, hey, the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier is listening, meaning that it's tilting to one side. The Red Hulk seems to be tearing things apart. The helicarrier is going to come crashing down. And so Stark's like, okay, fine. We got to try to keep this helicarrier afloat so that we don't crash into New York City and kill people. But we've also got to try to find a way to subdue the Red Hulk, because remember, right now, they don't really know what they're dealing with. All they know is there's a giant monster, a giant Red Hulk, or at least they don't really know that he's, red at this point, but we know as the reader. So, it's a giant Red Hulk that's running around the ship, tearing things up, and defeated Abomination. And so the idea here is, okay, we basically got to figure out what's going on. We got to get control of the situation. And so ultimately, it seems like we have Thunderbolt Ross and we have Clay Quartermain effectively hiding out. And suddenly Tony Stark, during an investigation, is attacked by the Red Hulk. Now, again, Stark does what he can against Hulk, but he's powerless. I mean, with his blasts, with his all his vaunted strength, it doesn't really make much of a difference. And so this is really a scenario where Stark simply says, okay, fine, we have the Iron Man protocol, activate that. But in reality, it's really just, Stark refusing to acknowledge the fact that they're going to have to abandon ship. That's really what's going to have to happen here. Now, of course, She-Hulk comes to, and she saves Tony Stark, before he falls off the side of the ship, simply because of the fact that his energy reserves are being exhausted. But doing the best they can simply doesn't seem to be enough, because in the end, the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier comes crashing down and is totally obliterated. And so at this point, we switch back to Rick Jones, and we have Rick Jones, traveling to this Death Valley, Nevada base where Bruce Banner is being held captive, simply because of the fact that he's going to find Bruce Banner. But when he gets there, some disembodied voice speaks to him and says, hey, I thought you were dead, and then of course it's revealed that it's the Red Hulk, and the Red Hulk seems to subdue Rick Jones. But then suddenly at this point, Rick Jones transitions into A-Bomb. Now, A-Bomb is basically like the second iteration of Abomination. It's like another version of Abomination. But again, as far as I'm aware, this is the first time he's shown up, and so we really have no information on how he got to be this way. But in the fallout of the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier crashing to the ground, of course, we have Tony Stark, She-Hulk, Maria Hill trying to survey the situation, trying to see if they can get things under control. But then Maria Hill says, hey, Stark, here's a transmission. We need you to listen to this. Now, this transmission is extremely important. And the reason why is because once Tony Stark fires it up, we learn there's something going on here with General Thunderbolt Ross and Bruce Banner. And the reason why we know that is because initially, like we saw before, it was Doc Samson and Thunderbolt Ross showing up and saying, hey, what do you know about what's going on right now? We've got a guy who traveled to Russia, presumably as a Hulk, killed the Abomination. No one knows where this new Hulk is coming from. No one knows why this new Hulk is emitting radiation more so than the Incredible Hulk ever was. And no one knows why he's using a gun. And so because of the fact that Banner is the foremost authority on gamma radiation, he says, fine, give me the files, I'll look at them, I'll see what I can do. But Thunderbolt Ross doesn't have a whole lot of faith in him. Now keep in mind, Ross hates Banner. I mean, having him here right now is, in the eyes of Thunderbolt Ross, the second best thing to simply just killing him. But as he gets ready to leave, Thunderbolt Ross is pulled aside by Banner. And Banner says a couple things here and there, says some small phrases, but we can't really hear what they are. Now we'll find out why here in a little while. But as Thunderbolt Ross is taking his leave, and of course Doc Samson asks, hey, what was that conversation about? He basically just says, hey, don't worry about it, it's nothing to be concerned about. But for Tony Stark, this is massive, and he's pissed that he doesn't know about it before, because a secret conversation between the Incredible Hulk and Thunderbolt Ross is something he needs to know about, especially when there's just a random Hulk running around and no one knows where he came from. And so jumping back to Death Valley, Nevada, with this conflict between A-Bomb and Red Hulk, this was really just Jeff Loeb setting the stage for a battle between Bruce Banner Hulk and Red Hulk. And the reason why is because with Banner inside this lab, it seems as though escape was impossible, just because of the security systems that were built in, the fact that it was powered, the fact that he would be gassed if he tried to make his way out. It was almost impossible to get in. Not only that, he also drops clues in terms of who it is that Red Hulk is. Now, of course, we know who Red Hulk is right now, but within the confines of this story, we didn't know. And so while they're fighting on the military base, there's a couple instances, there's a couple things, for example, there's a retina scan that confirms confirms this guy has access to it. The last time we saw that, it was both Doc Samson and General Thunderbolt Ross who were able to make their way inside. Now, of course, with Red Hulk and A-Bomb going against one another, because of the fact that their battle is so massive, because they're so strong, while Red Hulk is easily able to subdue A-Bomb, as he's punching him and beating the absolute hell out of him, he's literally punching him through, the planet, and down into, down below the surface. And because of this, it's creating earthquakes, in the immediate area. And because these earthquakes are so severe, it basically begins to damage, to shake, and to eventually rupture these gas tanks that are supposed to be gassing Bruce Banner, whenever he tries to make his escape. And so because of this, because it's such a volatile situation, he literally just transforms into the Hulk and smashes his way out. And so from here, we basically pick up with the security systems in the sense that there's these, robotic versions of Betty Ross as birds and so on and so forth. The only reason why that was done, at least as is told to us by Jeff Loeb, is so that if Hulk were to ever escape, they'd be able to play psychological games by having him go against what it looks like Betty Ross, which at the very least would, shake Hulk enough, or at least, cause enough of a pause that he could be subdued by whatever means they would normally use. But ultimately, because these security systems are easily taken out and they're eliminated, by the time Red Hulk is finished dealing with them, Bruce Banner has emerged. And so now we have Red Hulk versus the Incredible Hulk. And I'll be honest with you guys, when this first happened, when the story was first released, everybody who was reading it knew it was going to happen, right? Like, we knew that if a new Hulk was going to be released, somewhere along the line, the Red Hulk would fight against him. It just made sense. Not only that, who would not be interested in a fight between the Incredible Hulk and the Red Hulk? What Incredible Hulk fan would not want to see that? And so because of this, it was really just the one thing we were looking forward to the most. Now from here, Jeff Loeb actually throws a little bit of humor into the story, because I think that's one of the important things. When it comes to the Incredible Hulk, they're usually hardcore, they're usually really tough, some really bad things usually happen. They're usually pretty dark and gritty. But for Jeff Loeb, he has a pretty good way of intermingling comedy and with a serious story. And the way he does this is we have a Watcher the Watcher, because again, this is before Original Sin. So this is before the Watcher was killed by Nick Fury. We have the Watcher descend down on Earth and basically say, hey, look, I appear whenever there are going to be monumental changes. And so if a storyline takes place and I show up, it means that storyline is going to be huge. But while he's in the middle of, breaking the fourth wall and giving us the spiel, he's attacked by the Red Hulk. And the Red Hulk punches the hell out of him and essentially just starts beating into him. But of course, Hulk steps in, and this is basically Jeff Loeb kind of transitioning back to the serious nature of the story, at least at this point in time. Now, one of the things that I really hope you guys notice here is the big difference between Red Hulk and Hulk himself. And I think Jeff Loeb did one hell of a job doing this. When it comes to Bruce Banner, like we talked about before, when it comes to the Incredible Hulk, he's just a mindless beast. I mean, no, that's Savage Hulk. Of course, Professor Hulk is smart, but when it comes to like Savage Hulk, Savage Hulk was just mindless. I mean, he would just get angrier and angrier. He'd get stronger and stronger. And the only solution to a problem was just beating it up. That's just how Savage Hulk was. That's what this is right now. This is Savage Hulk. And Savage Hulk just tearing through, and trying to overcome Red Hulk is thwarted by the fact that Red Hulk is smart. Red Hulk is tactical. He's strategic. He's able to think in his Hulk form. And so it seems very much like Red Hulk is a guy that can counter all the Hulk's moves. And that's how this works. Now, something else to keep in mind here is that we'll see at the end of the story, Red Hulk's just not as strong as the Incredible Hulk. His strength isn't limitless like the Incredible Hulk. And that's really going to be the edge, that gives Incredible Hulk the victory alongside Thor and the rest of the heroes. But the idea here is that as Hulk continues to pummel away, because he's basically just kind of like this broadsword, just swiping, just taking these huge strokes at Red Hulk. Red Hulk is more like a scalpel, and he's able to take these small maneuvers, sidestep, able to work his way around the Incredible Hulk, and in doing so is effectively able to subdue him by breaking his bones, or at least breaking his arms. And so in response to this, or while this happens, this fight takes place, we switch over to Tony Stark. Now, Tony Stark is meeting with Gabriel Jones, and all Gabriel Jones is really saying here is, hey, we found some materials that were left behind. We found a few things here and there with regards to what was going on with the Red Hulk going through the helicarrier and tearing things up. But he also says that Clay Quartermain has passed away. Now, the death of Clay Quartermain isn't the biggest thing in the world, but it is pretty significant in the realm of S.H.I.E.L.D. And the reason why is because Clay Quartermain is a guy that dates back to the stories of Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., when he was the executive director and he was the guy running the show. And so Clay Quartermain has been part of S.H.I.E.L.D. almost as long as Gabriel Jones. Now, we know Gabriel Jones predates S.H.I.E.L.D. because he fought alongside Nick Fury as part of the Howling Commandos. But because of the fact that Clay Quartermain had served as part of S.H.I.E.L.D. with distinction is really a sad moment here, just because of the fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. has lost one of its best agents. It's not a great big huge thing, but it is kind of cool to see Jeff Loeb, focusing on the smaller aspects of the story and kind of paying tribute to those individuals who have been part of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Marvel Comics that had passed away or that had died, in battle and had been part of the group for such a long amount of time. But not only that, we also have Commander Maria Hill presenting Tony Stark with a gamma irradiated coat. Now, Tony Stark doesn't initially know why this matters, and of course Maria Hill doesn't pick it up just because of the fact that if she were to be exposed to this radiation by it actually touching her skin, Lord only knows what would happen. She'd probably go through mutations. I don't know if she'd become a Hulk, but she'd probably die of cancer. But the fact remains here that Tony Stark doesn't really recognize the significance of this. In his mind, it's a gamma irradiated coat that was shredded when whoever this Hulk was turned into the Hulk, but aside from that, it doesn't really seem to tie into the major events going on right now. But Maria Hill says this coat belongs to Leonard Samson. And so it seems like what, Jeff Loeb is telling us is that the Red Hulk is Doc Samson. That seems to be the initial case. And the reason why he's saying that is because the Red Hulk puts off gamma radiation, the coat's covered in gamma radiation, putting two and two together, all paths or all the clues lead to Doc Samson. And so switching back to Red Hulk and the Incredible Hulk, because of the fact that Hulk had been beaten into unconsciousness, because he basically collapsed from the pain of having his bones broken, he eventually came to when Red Hulk woke him up, basically, shook him to the point that he woke up. And when he did, he found himself on top of, the Golden Gate Bridge. But as he's there, this is essentially Red Hulk saying, I wanted the world to see this. I wanted the world to be aware of the fact that I'm the one that killed, Bruce Banner. And so again, while the Incredible Hulk tries to fight back as best he can, Red Hulk's easily able to overpower him using, strategy, using intelligence. And while, I guess after Hulk is beaten, suddenly Thor makes his appearance. Now, this was a really cool thing. This is actually a very heated topic in the realm of Marvel Comics, because this is the segment in the story when Red Hulk lifts the hammer of Thor. Now, the reason why this is a big deal is because for years and years and years and years, for decades, the rule was only those who were deemed worthy could lift the hammer of Thor. How that worthiness was calculated was based just on the enchantment Thor had put on there. It wasn't until recently in Jason Aaron's run that we basically learned the hammer can think for itself, that the hammer decides who's worthy and who's not. The idea behind this, though, was that someone like Red Hulk wouldn't be able to pick it up. But even then, there was no guarantee, because while most people who had lifted it were people who were inherently good, guys like Andy Android could pick it up, but Andy Android was a robot, and so he was neither good nor bad. He was just a guy who could lift it. There were people that would fight against Thor but could still lift his hammer. It was just simply a matter of falling in line with what Odin considered to be a person who was worthy of being an Asgardian or worthy of being Thor that would allow them to lift the hammer. But what Jeff Loeb did is he effectively circumvented that. Of course, while Thor is fighting against Red Hulk initially, his hammer has no effect. His hammer doesn't really do anything to impact him, and in fact this takes Thor by surprise, because even if it didn't necessarily incapacitate Red Hulk in his entirety, at the very least it would have caused him to stutter back. At the very least it would have caused some kind of an effect, but it didn't. It literally just hit him as though it was hitting true adamantium, and absolutely nothing happened. And so when Red Hulk's able to overpower Thor in terms of punching him, what he does is he grabs him and he basically jumps into space. Now again, this takes Thor by surprise, because the question that's always been asked, or the question that was people are always kind of curious about up to this point, is if a person is not worthy of wielding Thor's hammer, can they lift Thor while he's lifting the hammer, or does the enchantment still remain and Thor simply just can't be picked up? That was one of the questions people had, and Jeff Loeb kind of danced around this and said, well, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're worthy or not. If you can't lift the hammer by itself, but you can lift Thor. But again, it creates just as many questions as it answers when it comes to the hammer of Thor. More so than that, Jeff Loeb used some pretty shaky logic here. What happens is once they get into space, Red Hulk says, look, I've been studying you and I've been studying your hammer. I know how it works. Only the worthy can lift it, unless you're in zero gravity. And so what Jeff Loeb seemed to do was tie the worthiness of being able to lift Thor's hammer with the effects of gravity. Now, in truth, while this was really derisive in the community, while a lot of people didn't like it, it actually made sense. And the reason why is that the closer you are to Earth, the more intense the gravitational pull, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons why satellites that are orbiting Earth don't just come crashing down immediately. The gravitational pull of Earth gets weaker the further away you are. By having him outside, or at least at the furthest reaches of the Earth's gravitational pull, it makes sense to say that the only way for the hammer to control who's worthy and who's not is to basically increase the gravity of whatever object it's on so that the person can't lift it. The gravitational pull just becomes so extreme. But at that point, we're talking about, the idea that the hammer is able to influence reality, that it's able to manipulate, the atoms and molecules of an entire planet or moon or asteroid or whatever it's sitting on at the time when someone tries to lift it. A more logical logical line of thought is that the hammer just increases its own mass to the point that it's impossible to wield, and its mass increases relative to the strength of the person who's trying to pick it up. And so, the mass would increase infinitely in an example of someone like the Incredible Hulk, whose strength is also infinite. But again, Jeff Loeb doesn't really answer this per se. He just kind of dances around it, and he says, well, if you're out in space, the effects of gravity don't really apply here, and so you can lift it, you can pick it up, because the hammer needs gravity in order to prevent people from being able to pick it up. It's just one of those weird situations here. And so these few panels, this fight between Red Hulk and Thor just split the community right down the middle. People were pissed, because it was such a deviation from what they were used to. But switching back over to Tony Stark, because of the fact that he's trying to get this video deciphered, the best person to go to for this is really Reed Richards, just because of how advanced technology is in the Baxter building and because of how intelligent Reed Richards is. Now, it's kind of ironic that Tony Stark couldn't figure it out on his own, considering he's probably the foremost person when it comes to engineering, but when it comes to overall intelligence, Reed Richards, Dr. Doom, these guys usually take the cake, and it would make more sense that Tony Stark would go to Reed Richards as opposed to Dr. Doom. I think it would have been cool if he'd have gone to Dr. Doom. I would have liked to have seen it, but the idea here is he basically goes to Reed and says, hey, can you try to see if you can't filter out what it is that was quieted down, the audio that was lowered in the conversation between Thunderbolt Ross and Bruce Banner. But from the nature of their conversations, the idea seems to be that as far as Bruce Banner is concerned, Doc Samson is most likely the Red Hulk. Now, we're just kind of drawing conclusions with this because we don't know. I mean, this scratched out text that, even Reed Richards and Tony Stark don't know the full extent of what it is that's being said, but the indication is that it's Doc Samson. And so switching back to the Golden Gate Bridge, we of course have A-Bomb rescuing the Incredible Hulk and then bringing him back. But what Jeff Loeb's doing is he's basically setting the stage for an expansion of the Hulk roster. He's basically growing things in terms of where they used to be, because to be honest, and for those of you guys who are relatively new to the Incredible Hulk, up until this point, all you had were the different versions of Bruce Banner when he was the Incredible Hulk, Joe Fixit and the Savage Hulk and Professor Hulk and so on. And then you had like She-Hulk, and that was it. You didn't really have anything besides that. And so by adding in A-Bomb, by adding in Red Hulk, he's basically bolstering things. But what he's also doing is he's giving us the superior nature of the Incredible Hulk. Now, initially, when, of course, Maria Hill goes to Tony Stark and says, hey, look, there was this great big huge event outside of San Francisco. There was basically this giant earthquake, and the result is that the Red Hulk seems to be causing San Francisco to slip into the ocean. Ultimately, he basically gathers like the powerhouses of Earth's superheroes. So you have She-Hulk, you have Ares, the god of war, you have the Human Torch, Namor the Submariner, the Thing, just characters who were kind of bred for war and would seem to be the best suited in this particular situation. And so ultimately we get this sort of finality, we get this final fight between, the Incredible Hulk and Red Hulk, in the sense that we have, all of them banding together, but Namor the Submariner is essentially
This is Batman. Security level Omega. Password Delta Charlie 27-5-1939. Enable new protocol. Title Agamemno Contingency. Should any of the core members of the League turn rogue, we need to have plans in place to handle each and every one of us should we become a threat. The members of the League are my teammates, but we need to be prepared for the worst. Always. Agamemno Contingency, file codename Last Son. If Superman ever becomes a threat to the planet, the following protocols will need to be enacted to ensure our survival. The sample of green kryptonite in Vault 7B, provided by Superman himself, will incapacitate him with brief exposure, and prolonged exposure would, in all probability, be fatal. Portions of this kryptonite, under exposure to radiation, created a variation of kryptonite that is red in color. Side effects of this type of kryptonite are unknown. Further testing is required. Agamemno Contingency, file codename Red Sands. Jean Johns, the manhunter from Mars, is the heart and soul of the Justice League. However, his strength and speed make him a formidable opponent should he ever turn against us. His vulnerability to fire would be hard to exploit in a defensive position. However, research suggests that a nanite virus spiked with magnesium would cause his skin to combust in contact with the air, neutralizing him as a threat. Must investigate further. Agamemno Contingency, file codename 2814. The ring of a Green Lantern is the most powerful weapon in the universe, limited only by the imagination of the bearer. The ring cannot be separated from the wielder except in the event of their death, and the ring's natural defenses prevent direct attack. But in order to use the ring, the core member needs to be able to see what they are doing. While an attack on the eyes would be ill-advised due to the defenses of the ring, see Table 38B for full offensive lists and their attendant probabilities of success. Research indicates that a post-hypnotic suggestion could be planted into the Green Lantern's psyche, causing them to believe themselves blind. The ring would then make them blind, enforced by their own willpower. Must test out this theory on Guy Gardner. Agamemno Contingency, file codename Olympus. Diana is a good friend, which is just one reason it would be difficult to face her in combat should she turn against the League. It's not a thought I relish. But if it must be done, the following strategy could be useful. If she could be convinced that she is fighting an equal, she could then theoretically be trapped in an unending cycle of combat against a phantom opponent. Must investigate feasibility of neural virtual reality technology. Agamemno Contingency, file codename Polymer. Plastic Man, a unique opponent. Every molecule of his body is under his command, and he can make himself into anything he imagines. We're lucky that he's on our side, and that he's more concerned with being comic relief than anything else. But should he turn, freezing him with liquid nitrogen or some other agent is the best emergency response I've been able to identify. After that, it's just a question of storage. Agamemno Contingency, Notes section. Basic counters to other JLA members require further research. Flash, paralysis. Green Arrow, immobilize one of his arms. Zatanna, trachea trauma. A well-timed blow would easily do the trick. Red Tornado, EMP. Firestorm, Phantom Zone. Lack of raw materials should nullify his powers. Aquaman, hydrophobia. Investigate modification of Scarecrow's fear toxin. Black Canary. Tear gas, if administered quickly enough, should cut off her ability to speak and scream. Alternatively, I have recordings of her scream which, if played back at equal intensity, can cancel out the sound waves. If these contingency plans are discovered in the wake of my being incapacitated, please understand, this had to be done for each of us. Which brings us to Agamemno Contingency, codename Detective. While Batman is a master strategist and combatant, he is only human. The best way to disable his strategic abilities would be to distract him. His parents are an excellent blind spot, as is his endless crusade to protect the innocent. Taking hostages is a good distraction, particularly if they're friends or family.
Think carefully before you do this.
We hear the rustling of prey.
30 seconds until minions spawn.
I recently did a video listing 5 times that Batman has gotten superpowers, a link to which is in this video's description. And a lot of people have been commenting on that video asking why I didn't include the times that Batman has wielded a power ring. And the main reason that I didn't mention them is that I knew I was
Keep watch.
Minions have spawned.
Our spirits have merged. Hold nothing back. Our spirits have merged. Who would stand against us? United as one.
An ally has been slain.
Our journey. Life speaks through us. Our journey continues. The spirits observe. Fury of the time. blood runs hot. Stalk the enemy. Power without bounds. Vigilant eyes.
An ally has been slain.
Life slips through us. Perfect. Crush and spirits rise. The heart fire calls.
Who can I touch? Who can I trust? Who can I love? If it ain't you, who can I touch? There ain't nobody. And who can I trust? There ain't nobody. Who can I love? If it ain't you. But that was then. This is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Back around. Back around, yeah. Back around. Love, love, love. Back around now. Love back around.
Would stand against us.
I can feel the memory in my brain. I can feel the cold running through my veins. Like it's been this way all of my life. Looking in the mirror through your eyes. Nothing makes sense, these tears won't dry. I let you down, down and out, never thought twice. But that was then, this is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Bring love back around. Love back around. Funny how you never quite realize that you already have paradise till it's gone away out of your life. Looking in the mirror, don't know myself. Nothing makes sense, this feels like hell. I let you down, down and out, never thought twice. But that was then, this is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Love back around. Back around, yeah. Back around. Love, love, love. Back around, yeah. Who can I touch? Who can I trust? Who can I love? If it ain't you, who can I touch? There ain't nobody. And who can I trust? There ain't nobody. Who can I love? If it ain't you. But that was then. This is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Back around. Back around, yeah. Back around. Love, love, love. Back around now. Love back around. I can feel the memory in my brain. I can feel the cold running through my veins. Like it's been this way all of my life. Looking in the mirror through your eyes. Nothing makes sense, these tears won't dry. I let you down, down and out, never thought twice. But that was then, this is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Bring love back around. Love back around. Funny how you never quite realize that you already memory in my brain. I can feel the cold running through my veins, like it's been this way all of my life. Looking in the mirror through your eyes, nothing makes sense, these tears won't dry. I let you down, down and out, never thought twice. But that was then, this is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Bring love back around. Love back around. Funny how you never quite realize that you already have paradise till it's gone away out of your life. Looking in the mirror, don't know myself. Nothing makes sense, this feels like hell. I let you down, down and out, never thought twice. But that was then, this is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Love back around. Back around, yeah. Back around. Love, love, love. Back around, yeah. Who can I touch? Who can I trust? Who can I love? If it ain't you, who can I touch? There ain't nobody. And who can I trust? There ain't nobody. Who can I love? If it ain't you. But that was then. This is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Back around. Back around, yeah. Back around. Love, love, love. Back around now. Love back around. I can feel the memory in my brain. I can feel the cold running through my veins, like it's been this way all of my life. Looking in the mirror through your eyes, nothing makes sense, these tears won't dry. I let you down, down and out, never thought twice. But that was then, this is now. I know I said I'd never, but I know I let you down. And it feels dead in this town. So tell me, when will you bring love back around? Bring love back around. Love back around. Funny how you never quite realize on your heart, heavy on your mind. Wandering the streets tonight. If you're looking for a home, you are not alone. I can be your guiding light. 'Cause I promise you, I'm a dreamer too. Heavy on my heart, wandering the streets tonight. When it all counts for something, and your pocket's full of nothing. Let's get high, believe it. I can promise you, yes, I am a dreamer too. We are dreamers together, always and forever. Let's get high, believe it. I can promise you, yes, I am a dreamer too.
Crush any barrier.
Heavy on my feet, heavy on my knees, walking down a winding road. If you're looking for a home, you are not alone. I can be a stepping stone. 'Cause I promise you, I'm a dreamer too. Heavy on my feet, walking down a winding road. When it all counts for something, and your pocket's full of nothing. Let's get high, believe it. I can promise you, yes, I am a dreamer too. We are dreamers together, always and forever. Let's get high, believe it. I can promise you, yes, I am a dreamer too.
Supreme focus.
Heavy on your heart, heavy on your mind. Wandering the streets tonight.
Keep watch.
If you're looking for a home, you are not alone. I can be your guiding light. 'Cause I promise you, I'm a dreamer too. Heavy on my heart, wandering the streets tonight. When it all counts for something, and your pocket's full of nothing. Let's get high, believe it. I can promise you, yes, I am a dreamer too. We are dreamers together, always and forever. Let's get high,
heart, heavy on your mind, wandering the streets tonight.